Hello, hello, everybody. Okay, we got a little bit of a better setup. Little bit. The lighting needs fixed. So maybe I'll bring one of my lamps over there. Let's see if we can get this happening for me here. What do we think? All right, well, while I work on that, I'm going to share the link. Please remember to like and subscribe and share this wherever you can. So I am live now, taking questions and talking strategy for family court and CPS reform through the lens of a mother, through the lens of a licensed educator. Let's say that, licensed educator. Boop. Copy, paste, next, post and share. And then we're going to go over to our groups. All right, I'm working with another mom really quick, just reading through something. I'm going to talk a little bit about this tonight. The FERPA, which is the federal laws around protections for children in disabilities and just ensuring their educational rights. So let me get... Somebody sent me something, The Great Satan. I will play it tonight on my live. Okay, so I'm going to review the star chamber thing. Continue. So I don't know if you guys know what a star chamber is. Look it up. But basically, a star chamber is like this. Oh my gosh, Jennifer Barnhill. Oh my gosh, I got to text him. Hold on. Okay, I'm going to share this. I know Jennifer. She's the one who told me that Rep Panetta would fix the mold in on-base family housing if there was. And we're back. All right, we're back. Cool. Now we're live. So welcome back. We're going to talk about this infographic that I did last night. I think that I was explaining it to somebody who doesn't have kids, who is in family court zeitgeist because they know what I'm going through and they want to help. And so I am trying to get this information out there because what I want this space to be is a place where we're actually making progress on strategies for reform and utilizing case law or policies, state, local, and federal, that are already on the books to move our cases forward. So in my case, I have invoked my ADA rights, and that has made a world of difference because they're no longer able to just kind of write me off and be like, oh, the mom's crazy. And I'm like, no, actually, I'm not crazy. I've got really significant PTSD caused by the trauma and abuse that family court continues to allow my perpetrator of domestic violence to inflict on me. And the sooner we can get the system to acknowledge that and stop it, the sooner I will be better. So, but the ones that are child focused. So whatever you can do to get the focus on the best interest of the child, that is always going to be my recommendation. And the best interest of the child involves getting their doctors involved, getting their schools involved, and getting their church, getting their what do you call them? Like they're sports coaches, which that actually reminds me. I'm going to send this to a woman. Her name's Melissa, and she is out in Ohio, and she discusses a lot about how discussing it's like semi-pro sports. Okay, so she's advocating for better training for mandated reporters in sports. So like volleyball coaches, soccer coaches, anybody who comes into contact with kids. I take it for granted that I am an educator, right? So like I do this professionally. I'm literally a professional teacher. In my own custody case, I was allowed to testify as an expert witness because I have a master's in education and collectively have more one-to-one time with students, with children of of minors under the age of 18 than literally anybody who put their hands on my case combined. I have hundreds of thousands of hours of teaching hours. So if you do 17 years of teaching one-to-one and in group settings across however many students those are that I've been responsible for educating and ensuring are safe, it literally does make me an expert on the topic. In my family law case, I was able to testify as an expert on child psychology in the sense that I've had training in it and I have a master's in education, which goes back to this whole idea of how perpetrators of domestic violence can use family law, or just people who want to influence custody decisions can use criminal courts to influence family law. So my ex-husband attempted to get my license taken away. And what ended up happening instead was the Monterey Peninsula Unified School District actually acted to protect me. They brought me in, they talked to me, and they said, you are not the first educator to experience domestic violence in your home. And we want to support you through this process and help you personally, as our teacher, as our educator, get safe. Now, what they failed to do was protect my children. And some of that's on them and some of that's on me because I was in such deep trauma that I just kept assuming that all of the other mandated reporters were doing their job. And you know what they say about assuming? If you assume, it makes an ass out of you and out of me. And that's why I sent this to Melissa, because I want her to jump on, hopefully, and discuss how anybody can be a child advocate. If you are a teacher, a Sunday school teacher, a librarian, a sports coach, a lifeguard, a music tutor, anything, anybody who comes into routine contact with children is a mandated reporter. Other mandated reporters are the supervised visitation providers that are a part of this family destabilization that tends to happen. Why does that happen? Because they are literally incentivized to keep you in supervised visitation because that's how they make money and that's how the court continues to play out. And so if you're not doing your own due diligence and reporting that there are violations happening, these institutional missteps that can be inadvertent or intentional will lead to a point where the parent is so destabilized and has no resources, no support, no medical care, nothing, that they then fall out of the chain of influence for their child, and you're left literally with the other reporters. Now, I was talking to my crisis counselor about this, who made another mandatory report about my children. She said, I'm going to have to report this. I said, go ahead. They've never done anything. And that's the most horrific part, is that when you have perpetrators of domestic violence in positions of power and authority, as we are seeing with the Epstein files, those positions of power and authority can be exploited so that until there's like a tipping point number, and this is what she told me, until there is a tipping point of enough mandated reporters from various times and like over a certain time period and from enough like different sources that they actually take it seriously, which is disgusting and it's heartbreaking. And it goes to this image that I drew yesterday that I'm going to recreate for you guys tonight a little bit cleaner and more succinctly. It goes to the reason why we see these cases drag out so long in family court, and then in CPS, how these forced adoptions and money entering the system that incentivizes children to be placed in long-term foster care and or adopted out. Now, what's so sick about that is that it really does come down to money. Like, it really does come down to money. And some of it is bad actors who infiltrate a system that they know they can exploit. And some of it is just good people who are trying to do the right thing and get involved in social services or DCFS, but don't realize that there are other factors at play that are quite literally working against their best efforts to protect children, and actually are targeting the children themselves. And we're seeing more and more reports of undercover investigations of CPS workers who are quite literally lying and fabricating evidence, and who are being told by their supervisors that they will get bonuses or special treatment or promotions for removing children from the house, because CPS does not get any federal funding until the children are removed from the home. And in family court, lawyers don't start to really rack up their bills until custody becomes disputed. And once supervised visitation providers are in the mix, these lawyers are charging to review those reports and to interact with the custody supervisors. So there's this whole, and then the custody supervisors or the visitation supervisors are being paid to testify. So it's a whole racket. Like, there is money being made. But that's why we have systems in the United States that are meant to protect children. Our teachers are our first line defenders. Our coaches are our first line defenders. So, like, if a child is homeschooled and they are in a community, a community program, that may be the only safe adult that child comes into contact with, and it needs to be reported. That's why I think that, I was talking to my doctor this morning, and I was like, I've now that I'm starting to heal and come back online, and I'm in, trauma recovery, I'm seeing how the fact that I continue to show up and I continue to report, and all I have to say is, I'm a licensed educator. I am meeting my mandate. What you do with this information is up to you, but I will be coming back, FOIAing it, doing a public records request, and getting this documentation. And now I have it. I should bring it over here. I'm going to show you guys what I've been working on the last couple of weeks. It's basically the military's investigation and then the local authorities' investigation, and how there is a disconnect between the two systems, which allowed for myself and my children to fall through the cracks, because I don't think, and yes, I do think that this was specifically because of the rank of my abuser. I think because he's a very high-ranking and well-placed soldier at the Presidio of Monterey in Monterey, California. He's the Associate Dean of the Defense Language Institute Russian language program, which I think kind of says everything we needed to say right there. And as another Navy captain who had the misfortune of going through the family advocacy program and the IDC program, which are military programs that do have an impact on civilian family law outcomes, which is why it's so important to have federal oversight for these programs, because they are across 50 US states and territories, and they even govern our soldiers overseas. So I'm working with DOD members, like active duty colonels, active duty captains, like active duty high-ranking officials who are using their expertise as military officials, and looking at policy and doctrine and strategy, and also having lived the experience of a family court survivor and how custody can be leveraged or pulled away from families through these bad actors who come in at the high conflict custody litigation, the domestic violence separation, the prolonged parent-child separation, the financial collapse during litigation, and then the court-ordered supervised contact. And then on the CPS route, it's a different down chain, but essentially what it is it's the intervention of a state actor who comes in and says, okay, we're going to take the kids for one reason or another. maybe teachers have reported or the other parent or whatever it may be. But that's where these third party reports from pediatricians, from doctors, from school personnel, anybody who has frequent and ongoing contact with the child to notice them over time become evidence that families are probably unaware that they could be using in their custody cases. So there are FERPA laws where even if a perpetrator of domestic violence is able to wrangle custody from a protective parent and claim that they are the victim and the children are victims, and they should be the parents' access should be withheld. The other parents' access should be withheld from their medical, their dental, their psychological reports, their education reports. No, false. That's not happening. Federal law, if you are a parent and your parental rights have not been terminated, you are entitled to all of that information. Hi, don't know who. Oh, punished no more, free to protect. Hi. Thank you guys. Thank you for coming. If you want, I don't need to type that. If you want to come on live, call me on my phone or FaceTime me, or not FaceTime me. Yeah, you could FaceTime me, or you could come on whatever this is. What are these called? Facebook. You guys, I'm sorry. My brain is finally coming back online, and it's like I'm able to now be in a place where so what I ended up doing was unpacking what happened with me in the military, right? Let me show you. Hold on. Okay. I had to move my desk because I need to lay all of this out. But essentially, what I have been doing for the last 2 years is unpacking what happened with the military. And at the same time, utilizing whatever resources were available to me within the community to try to understand how my children were taken from me unlawfully based on a literally falsified police report that the district attorney at the county of Monterey was able to see was a false report, and then dismiss charges in the interest of justice. But it doesn't mean that the damage wasn't already done. And I interviewed a lawyer in Southern Florida named Jennifer Tolston, and she had a word for it. And it's basically where somebody will make a false allegation of domestic violence or child abuse. And then when that is proven unfounded, it's generally not until much later in the process. And then in the intervening time, they will find whatever they can to go after that parent for. So my ex-husband initially tried to criminalize me. He was not successful because the charges were dismissed in the interest of justice. And he is currently under federal and state investigation for falsifying a police report and lying under oath as a uniformed service member, which does come with state and UCMJ charges. And I knew that he had fabricated it. I knew that he had made it up, but I also had to make a choice to stay alive. And I've talked about that in different podcasts, how I was told that if I told the police what had happened that night, that they would go back and arrest him, and then our children would be taken into CPS care. It was not a choice I was going to make for my kids, never in a million years. And so I chose to go. The charges were eventually dismissed because the preponderance of evidence in a criminal court is it's a preponderance beyond a reasonable doubt is the standard in a criminal court. Beyond a preponderance of evidence is what it is in a civilian court. And get this, they can lie, they can do whatever they want in a civilian court. The number of lies I caught my ex-husband's attorney in on paper is wild. Hey, friend, do you want to come on and chat? If so, just call me on my phone and I'll beep you in so you can be either FaceTime or audio only. And so going back to what the strategy is, perpetrators of domestic violence or people who are interested in using using civilian courts and criminal courts to influence custody, which DAs look down on, they will first try to say, oh, let's get them criminalized. And once those charges go away, then they go, well, let's get them institutionalized or pathologized through the fraudulent use of psychological evaluations. I had a heads up for my psychological evaluation because my ex-husband's attorney in a witness recorded conversation that she actually committed subjugation of perjury in by stating that there was nobody in the room, but really her she was recording the conversation. So she illegally recorded that conversation and or had her assistant on the line and didn't notify me, which invalidates my right to privacy, and therefore the recording that I have of it is completely fair game because I have it for my AI accommodations as an ADA accommodation for PTSD. I always go back through and I review the transcripts for everything because I'm not a great auditory listener. If you can't tell, but I'm better with reading things. And you gotta be kidding me. This is night 4 where a new device joins right when I'm online. Huh. That's 4. If you guys are tracking how many times this weird technological stuff has happened to me, I'm starting to realize that this is this is definitely my tech is compromised. But you know what? I live my life in complete honesty and transparency, so it doesn't matter to me. But back to what my ex-husband's attorney did. She committed subrogation of perjury, where she got her VA named Nirvana White to say that she was in her office and overheard a conversation. So there's a court transcript where this woman makes this claim, but there's also evidence to prove that she is actually a remote employee and lives in Arizona and conducts all of her business remotely. So you can't both overhear a conversation in the office and be a remote employee. So that's one. This attorney has done that other times with another secretary or assistant who's actually based out of Asia. And I had witnesses there when we were on the call with this person. And it just shows how you get these bad actors in family court who are only out for their bottom line. And there is a playbook where they literally will check your credit score beforehand. They will check your assets and then decide if they're going to take you or not as a client because of how much money they can get from you. And this is something that I warned my ex-husband's family about. I said, just so you guys know, this is going to go to the point where we're literally paying somebody for something that could be handled internally. It could be handled peacefully. It could be handled like simply. But when you're dealing with an apex predator and a perpetrator of domestic violence like my ex-husband, where it's very Ted Bundy-esque. And just for a reminder for anybody who doesn't know who Ted Bundy is, he was a serial killer who literally butchered co-eds, like college students. And his MO was to feign, he would feign like injury, or he would play like the injured, like, oh, like he would put on a fake cast and on the side of the road just be like, oh, I could just use some help if you don't mind just helping me get into my car, and then literally kidnap, rape, and kill these women. He infiltrated a sorority and killed a bunch of women, and he was the type of predator who learned his prey by being a volunteer on a rape crisis line. And I think in a suicide hotline as well. So when I say that, like, there are people who wear a mask, that's what we're talking about. These are the same people on the Epstein list. Bill Gates, perfect example, guys. This is an individual who literally was in charge of distributing vaccines worldwide, not just during COVID, but pre-COVID through the WHO organization, the World Health Organization. They had a building in Africa right by our embassy. And every time I drove by it, I would get a pit in my stomach and I could never quite understand why. I was like, and it said Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I was like, why am I so instinctively like skeeved by it? And it's just like that building just gave scary vibes. If you look up the embassy in Lilongwe, Malawi, it's like, if our embassy, well, actually, they just built or are building a new one. But if you go look where the old embassy was, you can see that foundation is right there. And now we're seeing emails where he's literally talking to Jeffrey Epstein, and he's admitted to this, that he had interactions with this person and is asking for antibiotics to slip his wife so that he doesn't give her an STD that he contracted from Russian prostitutes. My ex-husband was telling me that he was just gathering intel from a male janitor who he used to allow into his office after hours that made me very uncomfortable, especially when other embassy employees were telling me like, "Hey, do you know your husband's doing this? Like, you might want to keep an eye out." I'm like, "Oh, it's a guy. I don't like," and I just was so young and naive. When I started like seeing his text messages where the guy was like thanking him for giving him his underwear, I was like, yeah, you're talking about boxers. Like, okay, you can if you're and then my ex is like, "Oh, I was just giving him clothes that like I didn't wear." And I'm like, "All of the clothes that I bought you, like your civilian clothes?" I was like, "Okay, that's fine. Why the underwear? Why are grown men giving underwear to each other? That's weird. That's weird, right? Use it as a rag, throw it away, put it on the street. Don't give it to the janitor. That's weird, Dan." Anyways, and then he used similar types of excuses when I caught him on phone calls with prostitutes on a Sunday night on his embassy phone. So going back to this mask that they wear, there was never going to be an opportunity where I was trying to be reasonable in the divorce process that he was ever going to participate willingly and in good faith. I know that now. Growing up in domestic violence, I thought that if I continued to act in good faith and do whatever we wanted, literally wave a white flag at him during a supervised visitation exchange, which keep your records because when you take these records to experts who can analyze by date the other person's behavior through their own words or reporting, you create like a date time stamped record of how they not only committed domestic violence or perpetrated assault against you prior to the initiation of family court proceedings or CPS involvement, whatever it may be. You then have a record of everything that happened during it. And now, when we're talking about these systems, we have two systems. We have family court, where typically it is high income individuals, higher education individuals that have assets to hire these divorce attorneys and pay for supervised visitation. And we're talking millions of dollars. And I am going to, as soon as I can, put together a database. And what I want to collect is the names and the receipts of fees paid to lawyers versus what you got out of that. So my fees are up to $250,000 for a lawyer. Could have bought a house. I didn't, but I'll be curious to see what Brianna Cornwall thought she was going to buy with that. But she's not going to buy anything. She's not going to get that money. In fact, she's going to owe money back now that there are actual eyes looking at this. And again, this is why you want to document, because you have families that come into a system who are literally seen by these other bad actors within the system as cash cows, as money, and they're just greedy bad actors. But then other bad actors know that there are those shitty, gross actors in this zeitgeist, and then they're able to exploit that. And I feel like I am finally now in a place where just going through my own case records, like this is all just the military's data. This is my redacted copy. I have my unredacted copy that I keep secure because I don't want to give anything away inadvertently. But like, it was pretty easy for me to go through this and identify who everybody was or what everything, what was reported by who, what, when, where, why, because my stepmom had suggested early in the process, she goes, keep a journal because you're going to want to remember all of this and show your kids that you fought. So anywhere there's a redaction, I'm able to go in and get the actual information. Now that I knew the military was going to redact records, right? I knew it. I didn't think I was going to need to pull redactions for civil institutions. So if you're a victim in a police report, you're entitled to that full report and any evidence and any investigation, all of that. You have to request it through the appropriate channels, but you can get dispatch photos, you can get 911 logs, etc. And if they deny it or come back and say like it's partially denied, you then just go back and you just keep going back. Like I got a denial from the Monterey County DA's office and they were like, this is the only responsive information we have that we can release. And I was like, that's just not true, because if you're going to release this false police report, you got to also release the other 3 that were made, even if they're no longer valid, like it's still a part of the record. So you go in and you look at what they're willing to give you and then check against your own records for what was filed and what they might be withholding. And, it's up to you to decide, is that intentional withholding to protect somebody or something, or is that unintentional withholding, right? And you have to be the one to just do your own due diligence. And so what I have done is I've taken my federal case and the investigation that was done into my ex-husband on the military side, and now I am cross-referencing it with all of the supervised visitation reports, all of the emails with his attorney, all of the records from Child Protective Services, all of the school's records, absolutely everything. And I'm doing it chronologically so that it starts at, it actually starts before November 20th, 2023. It starts in April 2023 when my first, I went over it in a few videos ago, my first MHPI compliance letter of concern to Colonel Klein. And what I'm doing, what I am attempting to do with this is, one, show what happened to me and my children. Two, I am publishing this as a book. Like, this will be public knowledge. And even if I have to keep some of the redactions in, this is information that is in the interest of the public, because I am an educator and I took an oath to protect children. And I am doing this to, one, protect my children from future harm, two, let them see how hard I worked to engage with them, to keep a relationship with them, and how I was strategically denied access to them. And that is something that, as these laws start to change, we will be able to go back and seek Francesca always says it, recompense, which is holding the bad actors accountable. So like Brianna Cornwall, she's the big bad in my case. She's my ex-husband's attorney. And without her, his entire case falls apart because he wasn't legally savvy enough. And his cousin, who's the family law attorney in Pennsylvania, who actually works for a juvenile probate court, which I will be diving into. Don't you guys worry. Like, she's already been reported to the bar, and I will be diving into her at a later date, because she is the one that I suspect gave him the initial filings and the initial strategy, because he was so systematic about it. He had to have gotten it from somewhere. I think Kenny French is another. He's a lieutenant colonel, and I was friends with his ex-wife, who is a hero and still watches my IG stories. Love you. You know who you are. Not going to say your name because you're a hero. And I think what happened, you're a hero for getting out and showing me that there is happiness on the other side, and how happy you and your kids are is a testament to that. And I think what happened was my ex-husband consulted with other military officers who just got hosed, and he worked on ensuring that he would be protected. And so I think he's retired now, but Lieutenant Colonel Kenny French, let's see, he was an old Army friend of Dan's. Kenny French, LTC, Army. Let's see if we can find him, because he's now a civilian. Well, let's see. Is this him? No. Wow. There was a Kenneth P. French who was killed in action in World War II. Not the This is Kenny. So I told you guys during season 1, I was going to be naming names and showing faces. I've already shown you guys my husband. We don't need to go into him. But what we're going to do is I'm going to show you this little dossier of my old friends who didn't do what they should have done, which is protect women and children, especially when they knew the type of mother I was. And so again, this is why when the mask falls off and everybody sees behind the scenes and they see what they are actually going to be held accountable for as friends or supporters of people who commit domestic violence, you are not safe from public scrutiny. You are not safe from public opinion. You deserve to have your credibility questioned when you knew the type of mother that I was. You knew the type of person that I was. I'm a godmother to one of his daughters. And he allowed this to happen by protecting a uniformed soldier, a uniformed service member. This is how we systematically dismantle boys' clubs. we call it out. So let's go ahead. I'm sorry. You and I talked at length, and I repeatedly said, please help. This, you know, the type of mom I am. You know what I do for my kids. Help me. And not only did he not help, he advised my ex on how to get pretty much whatever he wanted and needed out of this divorce and not get screwed over. So, Kenny is a strategist and an operational planner with the U.S. Army. He's retired now. And I always really liked Kenny. He and my ex-husband deployed, but ultimately he program analyst. So now he's a civilian at the Program Integration of Army Talent and Innovation Directorate Initiatives. Oh, he's working for Booz Allen Hamilton. Huh. Okay. And then he was a strategist until September 2023. So that's when he retired. And then before that, he was active duty. Now he's in acquisitions. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that link and I'm going to send it over to one of my military friends who is helping me keep a dossier on these guys because they run in packs, they run together. And the more that this is the military term, cover down for each other, the more these systems of violence will perpetuate. And now, before I get into like recreating this for you guys and showing how I'm taking my family advocacy reports and my criminal investigation division reports and my Army medical records and like everything that the military had, I'm doing it from A to Z in a chronological order. And then I'm doing the same with my civilian records in chronological order. And the reason why the notebooks are like folded in on each other like this is because I'm cross-referencing. And that's why going by date is the most effective. And then anytime I have something that I need to add, I flag it and then I write it down so that I can keep moving through the process. And I'm like, go find this report from this date and print. And then I put a blank sheet in that page to hold it. And then I keep moving on so that I can go through. And then, this is going to take me weeks, if not months, but I'm doing it because I'm suing the federal government and I'm suing these bad actors. And in the meantime, I'm holding people like Kenny accountable, holding people like Jason Seiler, Lieutenant Colonel out of Patterson Air Force Base. He knew what my ex-husband had done. He knew how he had used him in this civilian litigation. But what he doesn't realize is what it cost me and my children and how what they allowed to happen by a senior official like my ex-husband has knock-on effects, because that means that there is a playbook. It's the DOD Deadbeats playbook that other men who, are like Ted Bundy's, even Ted Bundy got married in while he was in prison. So these are very conniving people. But when you start to peel away their flying monkeys who maybe don't have that mask, guys like Kenny, guys like Jason Seiler, you call out the network and then they go, whoa, this guy's radioactive. So like right now, how many people do you think are coming to Bill Gates' side? Right? Not many. How many people knew Epstein and were at his beck and call? And now that this is all out there, like, I never, no, not me. And it's like, yeah, bro, the internet doesn't lie. It lasts forever. So we're going old school with this. Back in medieval times and back in the early days of American history, we had stalkers where you would put your head in and you put your hands in and you would sit there. And your punishment was public scorn. It was public humiliation. And even if that is the only punishment that some of these officers who supported this nonsense that my ex-husband perpetrated, if that's the only consequence that they suffer, public humiliation and public scorn is important. It plays a vital role in our societies and in making sure that violence against women and children isn't perpetuated, and that if somebody is falsely accused of something, they have the ability to clear their name through public exposure. Which reminds me, part of solving this, what I want to be able to do is create, and I haven't figured out how we would do this without triggering victims. We have online databases of sexual assault like offenders and child, predators that anybody can go and look at. And that's a big reason why we always chose to live on base in military housing, because we never knew like what community we were moving into and what schools would be safe, what neighborhoods would be safe. And so it was always just kind of a better bet just to live on base, unless you had been to that location before and you had an idea of neighborhoods and you could look around and find, pedophiles and all that, because they're just not allowed on base. And we have these systems, right? But we need to be utilizing them more effectively to stop the pipeline of children being exploited. And so, what I mean by that is go back to our infographic that I made. This was like my brain is finally coming back online in real time, and I'm healing. I've been in really intensive trauma therapy for sexual assault recovery. And with all of the Epstein stuff coming out, it's just, I am so grateful that, like, I initiated this care months ago, and now I'm like in the process of it, and it's literally saving my life, because I wouldn't be able to get through this without having these grounding techniques and these incredible doctors who are versed in trauma informed care. And like one of the doctors called me today just to check on me after yesterday. She's like, yesterday was a really heavy day, how are you feeling? And I was like, I, I'm feeling so good that you called me and that somebody cares and that you're acknowledging that I did do a lot of heavy emotional processing and talking about something that, nobody wants to talk about. So thank you. So I'm hoping to pass on my healing to you guys, because as I start to heal more and more, my brain will come back online more and more, and I'll be able to help actually strategize how we can fix this stuff in real time while waiting for state or federal legislation to go through. Because like this week in Arizona, we had multiple ad hoc committee meetings in the Senate and the House of Representatives, in the local state legislature. And, these things take time. It's going to be months, if not years, before a lot of this stuff gets pushed all the way through, or multiple legislative sessions. And even though we're waiting on an executive order, I always am looking for, how did we actually get to this problem where we have to have an executive order enacted to enforce the laws that are already on the books? Like, shouldn't we just be doing the thing? And it's like, we're not doing the thing because there's very little oversight. And what I would love to see is a way of correcting these institutional missteps, is putting firewalls or fire breaks. That's what one of the majors or the captains called it. He goes, you need a fire break in family court. You need a fire break in CPS to like stop the process, so that everybody can go like, hold on, review in real time under a time constraint and actually look at what's happening. Because the more time that goes on, the more vulnerable the children involved become. And so putting fire breaks keeps this out of control family court sprawl or CPS sprawl from happening. And hopefully me talking about this is our first fire break. So we've already discussed how the family destabilization happens through the family courts and through CPS. The institutional missteps are when there are accountability gaps and just delayed investigations. And one of the things that I think that we could do to expedite a lot of this is holding people accountable in the public square. And that's what the Trebuchet is. It's like we're launching truth into the public square. I don't say anything if I can't back it up with evidence, with a law, or with an actual like documentation, or witness testimony or text message, like whatever. I always, like, if I say it, it's because I've got proof of it, because I lived with a narcissist for almost 20 years and always had to prove myself over and over and over. And it was exhausting, but also it refined my skills to know how to only speak the truth, insofar as, can I validate this? Can I show unequivocally how this is the truth? And all that to say, I think what we need to do is have, I don't know where we would put these. We would need to designate a place so that people aren't just inadvertently walking by and seeing it, but like somewhere, maybe at our local police station, maybe at the courthouse, we need to have a poster. We need to have like a digital screen that shows all of the children who are missing in that county and all of the perpetrators of domestic violence, all the perpetrators of sexual assault, everything. And even if that means your picture gets put up there and you're wrongly accused, you can then go back and seek recompense and say, hey, I was wrongly accused and you guys put my face up there. Now you're accountable. And that puts a firewall in place so that these institutions don't want to take on that liability of falsely arresting somebody, falsely imprisoning somebody, or doing something as a civilian order that then criminalizes a person. Because once it's criminalized and you get it dismissed, it's like you can only be put on there if you're found guilty. If you're not found guilty, then you should never show up there. But that's not what's happening in family court and CPS. You're found guilty before your innocence is determined. You're automatically guilty, and they automatically go in with these divisions that seek to just further divide. And so if we had some sort of fire break where we are looking at actual guilt versus an accusation, we then have a place in the public square where parents can take their kids and, you know, if they're old enough, show them the pictures of these people who just passed through and say, like, if you see this person in our neighborhood, if you see this person talking to anybody, if any of your friends see this person, you know, let mommy or daddy know, and or let a teacher know. It's where teachers can go and check. It's where school administrators can go and check. It's where sports people can go and check. You could also have this online, but there has to be a mandate where individuals who are in close proximity to children have access to this information, because they have to be able to validate it and take what the child is saying and match it with actual information. And, you know, we see this all the time, weirdos walking by school fences. I mean, the number of times I've been on the playground and a weirdo has come up and tried to talk to kids through the fence, and I've had to go over and be like, get the fuck out of here. This is a playground. Go. You're probably violating your parole. Go before the cops get here. And they're, oh, well, it's my niece. It's my nephew. I don't care who you are. This is a playground. Go. You are not welcome here. Like, if this is not a family member of a child, you got to go. And if you're not talking directly to the child that you are related to, you better get the fuck out of here. And I'm a mama bear like that, because we need protectors of our children. Otherwise, they get sucked into these systems. So I'm going to erase the board really quick and go through like recreating this in a cleaner manner, so that if you are trying to explain this to somebody who hasn't been through this hell, you can use this kind of like schematic as a way to show them like, hey, this is what we're looking at. So here's what I need to do though. I'm getting my camera set up, you guys. I bought the adapter that I needed. There we go. Boom, shakalaka. Now let's get an eraser, and we need our markers. Oy, 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 oy. Okay. Oh boy, whoa, that's gonna take more than just a good old-fashioned eraser. Hold on, stay there. Miss Manelik's class is still in session. Thank you for those of you who like actually tune in and watch this, even though you can tell that I'm winging it. Just as a reminder, I had a perfectly good studio. I had a beautiful setup. I was ready to go and do this as a professional, so that you're not watching this going like, this lady is like wild and not put together. But you know what? I'm a public school teacher. I make use of whatever resources and double-sided paper are available to me in real time, because there's definitely something to doing it live, you know, like Bill O'Reilly said, fuck it, let's do it live, because that engenders trust. and authenticity. And you guys can watch in real time how families who have suffered in CPS and family court come together to solve these problems while waiting for Congress to act. If anybody's ever seen, there's a documentary called Waiting for Superman, and it discusses how kids in these inner city schools are trying to play the lottery to get into the better school system. And they call it waiting for Superman because it's like you're waiting for your name to get called on the lottery, but the chances are like your name's not going to get called. So you're just waiting for Superman to show up and save you, no matter how hard your parents try to get you out of a system that is meant to entrap you. Well, not meant to entrap you, but unintentionally traps you in these economic systems that don't allow children to flourish when they have school choice. Meaning, if you grew up in a Section 8, like a district that was predominantly Section 8, those parents could have the opportunity to exercise school choice and get their kids into a better school through the school choice program, which I actually wrote my master's in education about the, trying to think what it's called, about the genesis of how school choice came to be over the years. Okay, here we go. So what we're looking at with this schematic, the family destabilization, I'm going to write it down and then we will do the infographic and I will make it big so you guys can see in real time. So we have here family destabilization. I just spell destab, I-L-I. Okay, so we've got family destabilization. And then you have institutional missteps. I want to make this one blue, even though doesn't quite match, but institutional missteps. And those institutional missteps can be intentional or unintentional. And then you have increased vulnerability. Okay. So if you woke up a couple weeks ago and you saw the Epstein files coming out and you saw everything on the mainstream media and you were like, what the actual fuck? How does this happen? How do we live in a country or in a world where this can happen? This is how. And this has gone on for, this didn't just happen overnight. This has been a 20, 30-year process. And it's not by accident. This is by design. And yes, the U.S. has been infiltrated by foreign actors who have sought to do this to our family unit to destabilize us as America's superpower. If you guys don't believe me, go and read your history books. And as a reminder, my name is Autumn Anelic, and I am a licensed social studies teacher. So at the very least, this is something I would be teaching in a high school level classroom that would pass the sniff test of not a conspiracy, backed by evidence, backed by our history books. So, family destabilization. So, we're going to go with a traditional family model of a mother, father. This could be any family unit that is whole and healthy that brings biological children into it, or even adopted children. But we're just going to start with the traditional model. It doesn't mean that there aren't other, male, female, or other arrangements, but I'm just going to use one to show you how the destabilization process works and how when you add those other couplings, it just increases the risk. So you have a mom and a dad, and then they have, let's just have them have 3 kids, right? Little girl, little girl, little boy. Should have made them sizes, like I'm trying to do these as a matter of scale to show you how involvement changes what happens with the family dynamic. So when you have a breakdown in the family unit, what family court does is it pushes the 2 parents in opposite directions. So it's like, oh, separate. And let's get a bunch of other actors in here, lawyers, guardian ad litems, judges, custody evaluators, visitation providers, supervised visitation providers, family therapy, psychological, like all of them, right? So the first thing that the system wants to do is separate these 2 individuals rather than giving them, just think about this, guys, rather than giving these 2 individuals the tools that they need to come to an agreement or fix whatever is causing this divide in the first place, like in my case, domestic violence. What if we had been provided therapy and mediation and court mandated counseling and court mandated things that are in the best interest of the children, rather than entered into a pipeline that just deprived us of access to resources, finances, family relationships, everything. And so you separate the family, right? And the kids are the they're the middle. So we get, and as soon as you separate a family, even if it's in the best interest of the children and the 2 adults, there's still a breakdown that happens, a spiritual breakdown, an emotional breakdown, a financial breakdown. Generally, when people separate, I mean, your credit score goes down, for goodness sakes, when you divorce. So there's always a diminishment of the primary parental figures. So you've got dad down here, and he goes from this big, meaning that's how much life force or resources or energy he has. And if we're going to just focus it just on money, then proportionally, he's still about the same size, but a little bit smaller. Mom, same thing, about the same size, but a little bit smaller. Kids, they then enter a system where they're kind of in the middle. And they're still whole people, but now they're introduced to a bunch of individuals who are not motivated by their best interests, who are not motivated in protecting them and providing guidance and services that will either reunify the family or decrease conflict. Instead, what you do is you get a bunch of actors who see that together, mom and dad have this. They have resources, they have homes, they've got good credit scores, they've got the ability to open credit cards and take out insane amounts of money to pay lawyers' fees, because in family law, lawyers cannot take a case on contingency like they can in other law, because the person paying is the parent, right? So these bad actors come in and they see, there's money to be made here. And now that we've split them, dad has, big ass money, and mom theoretically has big ass money. But how do we get that money from the parents? That's right. We commodify the children. So now this one becomes money. This one becomes money. This one becomes money. If you get 3 kids who enter CPS care and you can medicalize them, meaning you can give them a diagnosis or provide therapy, the state gets matching funds. But CPS doesn't get that money until the children are removed from the home. And that's how you can have 2 parents, similar to my situation, where they take the kids into custody. And then because there is acrimony at home and there's domestic violence in the house, they can say, hey, the kids aren't safe with either of these parents until rehabilitation or this or that. So we're going to take them and we're going to monetize them. Now, in my case, I chose to let the children stay in the home with their father so that he didn't kill me and so that he wasn't arrested, and we both went to jail, and then they went to CPS, because I'm an educator and I know what the CPS funnel looks like, and I did not want that for my children. So Instead, what happened in our case is the family court monsters come in. We've got, Brianna Cornwall, the lawyer, Michael Moreno, lawyer, Regina Marshall, the psych evaluator. Who else? Linda Maestes, the supervised visitation provider. Lily Maggiolo, the supervised visitation provider. Family Services Center, which gets federal grants. And the longer they can keep you in this system, the more they can drain you. So we have mom and dad getting pushed farther and farther out of the child's life over time that literally is infinite. We have children aging out of family court because their parents have been in litigation that long. And we have kids placed into emergency adoption because they've been in foster care for it's 15 months to 22 months is when they can start to adopt kids out. And guess what they get? Incentives for adopting these kids out. So now you have dad who's given up some of his money to the lawyers, and mom who's given up some of her money or all of it or whatever to the lawyers, to the guardians, to the psychological evaluators, to the visitation supervisors. And her resources, life force, energy, vitality is shrinking. His life force, vitality, and energy is shrinking. And heaven forbid you throw a criminal accusation in here. And then you're dealing with all of that fallout of the criminality, fighting that. You got to get a lawyer, got to do da. And eventually what you have is these parents who end up on social services themselves because their assets have been so significantly depleted. Like me, I went from like in a home where we made over $200,000 a year to being on food stamps because my ex-husband deprived me of access to my marital assets, and then was able to get a judge to somehow determine that I should pay for his lawyer from my portion of our shared marital assets, thus effectively depriving me of everything, including healthcare, and leading me to be on social services. So once I'm on social services as the mother, my money is very small, very limited, and controlled by what? The same systems that profit from me being dependent upon them and profit from my children being dependent upon them. So if anything happens to him down here and mom's up here on social services, will the kids come back to me? Who knows? Because, well, mom can't take care of herself. Mom is unstable. Yeah, because you forced me to go through, $30,000 of psych tests, which prove that I'm a victim of domestic violence, but you didn't care to look at those. $10,000 of court supervisors and court fees just to see my own kids. $200,000, $250,000 in lawyers' fees just to get a fair divorce or just to get a divorce with reasonable custody. So it's like, and you take women like me, I don't have dependency issues. I don't have drug issues. I don't have alcohol issues. And the worst thing that my ex could ever say is she's a criminal. No, the DA dismissed the charges in the interest of justice and found that you falsified a police report and used your position of power and authority to make that report. Not criminal. She's crazy. No, the $40,000 in psych evals and the years of medical evidence that show that you perpetrated domestic violence and sexual assault against me show otherwise. So what is it? You can't say I'm crazy. You can't say I'm a criminal, and there's no drug or alcohol problem. It is court-induced litigation, court-induced trauma that is designed to systematically deprive a mother or a father, this goes both ways, I am not blind to that, of their access to their children through draining them of their resources. And once you deprive somebody of their resources, their freedom, their ability to move about within the economy and keep a job, because if you don't pay child support, you lose your driver's license. How are you supposed to pay child support if you Uber and that's the only way you can earn money if they take your driver's license? There's so many things that the state will do to either inadvertently or inadvertently have an institutional misstep, which punishes parents for simply trying to get a divorce, or punishes parents within the CPS system by not providing them. They penalize instead of incentivize healing and incentivize good behavior, incentivize education, because it doesn't matter if you wait 6 months like I did to get onto a parent class that then took me 12 weeks to go through. Then I get the certificate. I send it to my ex-husband's lawyer. And she literally doesn't even respond. What the fuck was the point of wasting the public's taxpayer money to get me to do a parenting class if you weren't ever going to use that information? And furthermore, if the people who were conducting the class and saw signs of domestic violence and reports of child abuse, either one, didn't file those reports, or two, filed them and nothing was done. So you have a system that is broken. And that's where we can come together once we identify the broken system to fix it. Even if we're not waiting for Superman, right? We're not waiting for Trump or whoever's in office to fix this for us. We can fix this by holding our institutions accountable at the local level, at the smallest level, at the school board level, at your principal's level, at your IEP supervisor's level, like your individual education plan. Every district has somebody in their district whose job it is to monitor children with disabilities or special needs or access issues. And that's where, like, that's an angle that we can attack. Okay, so we've got the institutional missteps. We know how they do it in family court. We know how they do it in CPS. And essentially what's happening is as mom and dad get smaller and smaller, or mom or dad get smaller and smaller in the child's life, and their resources get smaller and smaller, they lose the ability to fight to remain a part of their child's life. And then what we are seeing in increasing numbers, devastatingly, is death. I call it murder by proxy. If somebody commits suicide while they are actively involved in family court litigation or CPS, that's not suicide. That is murder by proxy of a government institution. And it is our job as not just like citizens of the world, but citizens of the United States to hold these institutions accountable, because they shouldn't be getting away with this in the first place, because we already have the systems there to correct the issues. We just have to enforce them. But before we can enforce them, we have to see what's happening, come together, and then attack and invade. It's kind of like this thing I drew over here. It's the example of if family court is a virus and these bad actors are viruses that encircle and enslave our children, and they're all the S, the parents have to go around it, encircle the virus, and then attack like you would an autoimmune response. So I'm not a biology teacher, I'm a history teacher, but we are using lessons from science to do this. Okay, so we've already shown here that these kids enter the system, and we've got the institutional missteps, which intentionally commodify these children by removing them. So they go from green to blue because they might become wards of the state, or they might be institutionalized. They might be medicalized. They might be put into juvie because they're going to have increased rates of behavior issues, lack of school performance, truancy, just all the indicators, right? If you go into a classroom and you look at a child's academic ability versus like kind of their trajectory, you can base it on whether or not it's a one or two parent home. You can also base it on who the primary caregiver in the home is. If there's a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad, or if it's a primary, like I could go into a classroom and just from looking at students, and I don't care if anybody says this is profiling or anything. I'm an educator and I am trained to look at every single child that walks through my door and gauge where they are socially, economically, emotionally, physically, spiritually. I mean, that one's more just like, are you good? And when they come through, I make eye contact with them. And I do this like with my little kids, and you go, do you want a fist bump? Do you want a high five? Do you want a foot hug where you go like that? Do you want a real hug? Or do you just want like a hat tip, like a head, we call it like a hat tip. Like you just go like that because if you don't, it's like a kid if they have a contact issue. So they come in, you go, oh, good morning. And they point to what they want on the thing, or they just show you, and you usually know. And if you have a baseline for a child every single day, like every day, Abigail always just wants a hat tip. She's a low touch child. She is hyperstimulated. She doesn't like people in her space. And she is a hat child. Like she's a hat tip. And one day she's like, foot. And you go, you want a foot hug? That is a change in that child's baseline. And as an educator, I'm trained to see that. I'm trained to notice that. And I go, okay, Abigail, foot tap. Have a good day, sweetie. And based on what that child gives back to me, like, is that a step forward in their growth, in their exploration of how they want to engage with the world, or is it a sign of something else? In that case, it would be she's likely, especially if she's like showing more positive like social interactions or whatever, it's a sign of I don't want to say like improved social interaction, but it's an indicator that something is changing in that child's life. And it could be something at home, it could be something in the classroom, it could be something in their community. You just notice it as a teacher. And instinctively, when you spend every single day in a classroom with these kids for months on end, you pick up nuances. You see notes coming home from parents, and you track these kids. Emotionally, you're kind of like watching what's going on with them. You're watching their energy levels. Are they exhausted? Are they eating school lunch? Are they were they bringing packed lunch and now there's nothing in their packed lunch and you have to get them school lunch because they didn't have enough food in their packed lunch? Is their packed lunch healthy, or is it just like 2 bags of potato chips and a cookie? You're like, that's not a lunch, honey. That's a snack maybe, but let's go get you some milk from the lunch line. So as a teacher, literally that's our job. That's what teachers do. Now we have another student who comes through who every day is a hug kid, right? And they want that hug. And one day they come in and they just want the hat tap. And they go, Jonathan, are you okay? He's like, you go, okay, well, come on in and have a seat and we'll go. Because you got to get through all the other students in the line. But as a teacher, you're doing a gut check and you're going, that's weird. Jonathan always wants a hug. But today he's a hat tip. Okay, noted. And you just kind of monitor them throughout the day. If this pattern repeats and the kid doesn't get back to their baseline, you as an educator are monitoring that. You're noting it somewhere and going like, there's something going on. Or if a kid has like an emotional outburst during class, like we are mandated to notate this and to report it if it rises to the level of child abuse or just any kind of behavior issue, because we are the first line defenders and we have to come in and prevent our kids from becoming our community, the children in our community, from becoming commodities. Because what happens is as this money gets smaller for the families, this money, actually I should have done this smaller, right? It starts kind of small. Like it's big money here, little money here, where it seems reasonable to be like, okay, well, I guess we'll get the psych eval. I guess we'll do this. I guess we'll do that. Like in good faith, you're entering this system. Then you get over here and the role of the child actually becomes smaller, and you start to see how the money is actually the bigger piece of the system. And now imagine this with, I shouldn't have done so many kids. Imagine this with 1,000 families, how it can go from things that are being done, quote, in the best interest of the children, to these children are now commodities. The family's been completely destabilized. These are commodities. And you play that out over time. And, this could be 2025. By 2035, by 2040, we have a lack of parental involvement. We have a lack of societal oversight. And we have these kids who enter pipelines who become, susceptible to the increased predation of people who see this system or who build this system or who are actively participants in this system, monetizing the destabilization of the family unit, in inflicting or in implementing intentional institutional missteps so that they can have an increased vulnerability, like a population of children who are at an increased level of vulnerability for, and remember, this is where it kind of becomes like a funnel where like once the parents are gone, you've got this, like they're now in the system and they're coming in here. And I did this the other day and I made this an E for like Epstein, because I think that he is like, he's the big bad. He kind of represents what happens here, but they're sucking these kids into this funnel. And then over here you have children, it's the S's. So it goes from money to just the S's. children sold or trafficked into the sex trade, sold just in general. So sex, sold, slavery, there were 5, right? Sacrificed, which again, this all sounded like conspiracy theory until all of the evidence and the files started pouring out. And now victims are coming forward and are going to be able to actually hold these people accountable for things that they've been saying for years. So sex trade, sold, slavery, sacrifice, and then the most disturbing one that we are now seeing through the Epstein files, which I had heard about when I was doing my investigations for season 2 of the Trebuchet files. But even that was like, it was so far beyond what I could imagine. What I could see was young girls who were getting trafficked into these programs through like psychological, what would you call it? Like a girl's house or like a girl's program where young girls go to like be rehabilitated. Maybe it's like the equivalent of juvie or like the step before juvie. And then they're trafficked into sex work and then used as surrogates. I could see that happening. Like that's a very clear pipeline. The one that I am now settling into my bones as a reality that terrifies me, but we can see in the Epstein files of these journals that these young women, like they kept and they were in code, are you have young girls being used as surrogates to give birth to babies who they've never stood a chance of any of this. They are already born into the system. And then any children that they have go just automatically right in here. So when I used to teach economics, everything at its most basic level is a matter of supply and demand. There will always be There are always going to be bad people until we root out the evil in this world, until we look it in the face and we say no more. And if there is a demand, then they will go and seek a supply. And if children are the supply that they are seeking, it makes sense why systematic family destabilization, institutional missteps that can be exploited intentionally because there are unintentional missteps happening, can lead to increased vulnerability of children who are then not just sucked into this pipeline over time, but are quite literally born into it, literally born into slavery, literally born into sex trafficking, born into organ harvesting. So I have lived and worked overseas at U.S. embassies, and I worked in an orphanage in Malawi. I've never actually shared this story. And we had considered adoption while we were overseas. We didn't end up going through with it. But while I was volunteering in these orphanages, I would see these people come in, and they, on the face of it, seemed like decent people, you know, pastors or whatever. But something about their energy and the conversations I would have with them didn't match with their story. And, you know, having training in the State Department prior to going overseas, I just remember always thinking, trust your gut, but just like take note. And over time, I was able to see that these orphanages were quite literally being used as trafficking, like they were trafficking kids through orphanages. And it was local trafficking and it was international trafficking. And I would guess that for every child that went to a good home, a safe home, because I know kids who were adopted out of these orphanages and are with State Department families who I know are giving them a beautiful life, a safe life. For every one child that gets that, there's probably 10 that are trafficked or killed. And every country has a different standard for what they deem to be a quality of life. So for example, in Malawi, when I was volunteering in the orphanages, I was told that It was more humane for a baby to be buried alive with its mother than if she died during childbirth than it was for that baby to starve to death if there wasn't like a wet nurse or someone in the community who would take the baby because they are so poor that they don't have the money for formula or bottles. I mean, we're talking about poverty that is so extreme that that is a more humane way to treat an infant. And these orphanages where I was in Malawi came about mostly from foreigners who were finding babies abandoned or who villagers were, finding abandoned babies and then taking them to some of the mission areas and saying, like, can you guys help keep these babies alive? But at what percent when you don't have any kind of like birth control in that nation or family planning in that nation and babies are just keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. And there is a international supply. And I knew that living overseas. But what I didn't realize is that in America, we have institutions and we have systems that allow for that to happen in our country. It's just done differently. It's done with oversight and lack of accountability, whereas in other countries it's just done outright. And those aren't our nations. And so how do we intercede? We don't really. We can kind of like call on the Hague Convention, we can call on the UN, but when we're in the United States of America and this is what we are dealing with, where the fuck do we get off telling any other country or group of people how they should be protecting their children when we have institutions that are designed to destabilize families and push kids farther and farther into this? And again, I'm not saying this is always intentional, and I'm not saying that this is part of some grand conspiracy across the United States. What I am saying is that by interviewing thousands of families across the United States and physically going to a lot of these counties and states and court watching, what I am seeing is a group of judges, lawyers, guardian ad litems, and psychological evaluators, most of whom are affiliated with the AFCC, putting policies in place or utilizing procedures that contribute to this. And until we are willing to name names and hold these individuals accountable, nothing's going to change. And so that's where we, as parents, as guardians, as teachers, as coaches, as anybody who has an invested interest in protecting children, have to start to gather around. And if you've got the children here and they're vulnerable, and then you have this virus surrounding them, and what we should have is a bunch of S's for the money because the kids are money. We need advocates. We need teachers. We need law enforcement. We need judicial officers. We need everybody coming together and piercing through this, releasing these kids who are being held hostage for money in all of the ways that we described, and getting them out of the system through these, we're breaking through. The mothers and fathers are coming together, even if it's not the biological mothers and fathers, it's men and women of all different races, ethnicities, socioeconomic backgrounds, education backgrounds, everything. They're coming together and they're linking up to bring these kids out of the system one by one. So the parents need to link up to get these kiddos to safety. Again, I'm not a biologist, but I think you get the idea, because what we want is the kids that are trapped on the inside of this system to be on the outside, because then when we have healthy kids, we have the ability for these people to heal and become the best, most productive versions of themselves, who can then go and theoretically contribute to a society where we don't have to worry about our kids being sex trafficked. We don't have to worry about our kids being sold into slavery or used as surrogates in these disgusting rings. So I'm going to leave it there. That was like a lot, but I appreciate you guys sticking with me as I kind of work to conceptualize this. I've got a bunch of meetings in DC at the beginning of March, and I'm working really hard to bring together as many families as possible, and like moving away from this tribalism of supporting this person or this person. Or what we're now having a conversation about is good versus evil, not mothers versus fathers. It is good versus evil and people versus a system. So if you're watching this, please like, share, subscribe, bring a friend next time, and send me your ideas for how we as the parents push through these gates and get the kiddos out for like generationally. All right, bye.